Welcome back. Time to go back to brackets and get our hands dirty again. I'm really excited to start building this website. In this lecture, we will start by setting everything up. So let's go. Now the first step is to actually create a nice folder structure where we keep all our files very organized and that you can later use for a much bigger project. So I'll start by creating here a new folder and I will call this OmniFood. OmniFood. Alright. So now inside of this I'll create a first folder called resources. And inside of that folder, let me show you like this. Okay, inside of the resources folder, we'll put a folder for our CSS files, another folder for JavaScript, where we will put all our jQuery files, then another folder for the images that we're going to use in the project, and also a folder for some data. We'll probably not need this folder, but I will include it here so you know where to put it in case you need it for some projects of your own later. And inside of this CSS folder, I will put another folder for images. And the difference between this one and the other one is that these images are going to be used by CSS, such as background images. Okay, so in the resource folders go the files that are created by us, basically. And then we have another folder here, which is called vendors. And in here we have some similar folders, again CSS, but the difference is that this folder is for CSS that was not created by us, so that we downloaded from the internet and use for our project. And another one for JavaScript files. And one for fonts. That's probably where our icon fonts will go. So this is a structure that is very flexible and allows us to separate the files that were created by us and files that we download from the internet, like JavaScript plugins or CSS files, such we are going to use later. Alright, so this is our folder structure. So now let's go to brackets. And back here, this is our old project. You probably remember how to open a project or create a new one. It's here, this button, and hit open folder, and it's on the desktop, OmniFood. Okay, so that is our working folder. Now let's start by creating a new HTML file, and I will save it and call it again index.html, and also a new CSS file, which I will leave empty for now. This one is again style.css. So let's create our HTML structure here, starting with the doc type. I hope you remember this. Doc type HTML. Alright, here remember what comes next? Now is the HTML element. Give it some space. And one thing we didn't do in the first project, but I'm going to do is now, is specify the lang attribute. And we will say that this page is in English. Alright, inside of the HTML we have again the head and then the body, where all our main content will go. Okay, I will now include the CSS file, which is, as you probably remember, link, then rel, I want to say style sheet, then I say it's type CSS, and now I actually realized that I did a mistake here, because I want this file. You see, I put this file right here, but that's not where I want it. I want it right in our CSS folder. Right here. Great. So let me see. So as I told you before, we have this file tree here where we can see all our files. Okay, and here it is. So I can just delete this one. So brackets allows you to use this as a file explorer. You can delete and manipulate files in here as well. So now let me establish the link between these two documents. I'll write href, and it's inside the resources, inside the CSS folder, and it's style.css. And that's it. And now I will just give it a nice title, just OmniFood for now. We can just change this later. And we will also put much more stuff here in the head section later on. Another CSS file I want to include right now is a CSS file which is called normalized CSS. And as you can see here, normalized CSS makes browsers render all elements more consistently and in line with modern standards. It precisely targets only the styles that need normalizing. So it's like a CSS reset, which makes CSS looks the same in all browsers. So I'll hit this. Now I will save this inside our project folder, OmniFood. And as I explained before, this is a file we got from the internet. It's not our file. So I'll put this inside the CSS folder in the vendors folder. All right. So let's include it here. And it actually has to go before this file. So link, again, all of this stuff, style sheet, type, and href. Now it's in the resources, CSS normalize. Great. Now the next step we do in this kind of setup process is to include the web font we chose. Do you remember? It was Lato. So I will go to Google Fonts, and it's actually right here. So this is the Lato font. See here, there are some others here. Okay, this is Lato. So these are the different styles which are available for this typeface, with the different font weights, and down here some italics. So we want to use this one. And here we got to select all the styles we want. And I want the light one and the normal, which is already selected. I don't know about the very thin, but for now I will just use this. And also the italic, this one. We don't want to use all of them because that would affect the page speed of our web page. So we will just use these one for now, and we can always select more if we need them later. So it's very, very easy. All we have to do now is to come down here and copy this link and go back to our HTML file and paste it here, and that's it. And that's because this Google font is actually just a CSS file, which we use here in our project. But it's not a file that we download, it's a file that's in the internet here on the Google Font server. Alright, so let's make the first CSS definitions here. As you remember maybe from our first project, we should target our elements and put their margin and padding to 0. That's always the first thing that I do. And I also set the box sizing property, which we talked about before, which is border box. Alright, so now all margins and paddings are gone. And now for the HTML, we also make this basic setup so that we can get started. So the first thing, I will set the background color. No, the background color is not necessary because I want it to be white and that's the default, so it's not necessary. But just to show you, I'll do it anyway, and we know that white is FFF. Okay, now we can set the text color for the entire project. And what I like to do is to start with black, because I know it's 0, 0, 0. And then I use the color picker, as we did before, with Command E, and choose a nice gray from here. And I will use this one, 555, which is not too dark and not too light. But if we want, we can change this later as well. And we can also set the font family. So we will use, as we said, Lato. So all we need to do to set this family is to include the CSS file, such as we did before, and then use that font name right here. Now as a second choice, as I did before, I will say this Arial. And this is what happens, for example, if the user has no internet connection for I don't know which reason. So if Lato can't be displayed, Arial will be displayed instead. And now if Arial is not available as well, then we have this CSS keyword which is sans serif. So if Lato and Arial are both not available, then any sans serif font will be used. And I will also set a font size, an overall font size for the project to 20 pixels. If that's too much, we can always put it back later. Another thing about the font is to set the font weight. I'll say font weight. And if you remember, I will go back here. We selected 100, 300, and 400. And the default that I will choose here is 300. And the last thing that I should do here is text rendering and then optimize legibility. This will make our fonts rendering in a perfect way. Okay, I think that now we're ready to start. All the setup is done. Let me just see if everything works. We'll just put in some H1 element here with OmniFoot and test the whole thing. Open a live connection as we did before. Takes some time. Alright, this is OmniFoot with the font we just selected and with the font size we selected and with the font color. So that was the basic setup of our project. Next, we can start to actually build the site.